Hey everyone, we are so glad that you have joined us today. We have a special guest with us. Miss Hillarey Yoder is here today with us, and we're going to be following up from this past Sunday where Gabe and Hillarey had a chance to just share what God has been doing in their lives, in their hearts, as it relates specifically towards Honduras. And so there was definitely some things, as we were talking after the fact, that Hillarey would love to have an opportunity to even just elaborate on more. And this is why we've been doing this, is to give us an opportunity to elaborate. And so, again, thank you for joining us today. We're going to have a great conversation between the three of us. If you hear weird noises in the background, it's because we're currently recording this in the lounge, and there is massive construction going on right outside the windows. And so they're just living their best life over there. So try to ignore that as best you can. But we're going to have a great conversation today. So here's what we're going to do. We're just going to provide Hillarey some time to kind of elaborate on the story, what God has been doing, what he's been saying, how they've gotten to where they're at in all of this, and what that looks like and means for their family. And after that, we'll have some time just for some questions. Maybe grill you real quick on interrogate. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Hillarey.
Yeah, it sounds good. So I think on Sunday, it was way more emotional than we expected for both of us. Leading up to it, like, we knew it was going to be hard and emotional, even though so many people already knew. It still was like, we are doing this. Wow, we are doing this for real. So I think we got derailed a lot, in maybe midway. But we are, just to clarify, like, we're going to Honduras. Lord willing, October is our goal, but we're very open-handed with that, because in the beginning of the year, we were praying, Lord, when do you want us there? Yeah. Because he's been the one that's been doing this all along. We haven't really gone and pushed through anything. He's just bringing this to us. And we both separately were praying about it, had October on our hearts. Wow. And so we set that as our goal for October. So we don't know. We have a lot to do between now and then, but October is our goal. So one of the things after Sunday that was so much on my heart that I wanted to share specifically about was my personal story of wrestling through to a place of surrender. Because even though part of me wanted to go, a huge part of me wanted to go and say yes, before the door for Hospital Yehoah ever opened, God took me through 5 months of being brought to a place where I could say yes. And that started in October of 2022, after Gabe got back from that last trip, or his first trip after 10 years. He got back, and within days we looked at each other and we said, whoa, we think God is calling us to Honduras sooner rather than later. We don't know what that looks like. We don't know what that means.
So you felt like that first trip Gabe went was kind of like God opening that, saying, yes, I'm doing this. It's been 10 years. This has happened for a bigger reason than just going to visit family or friends or whatever. Yes,
right away. Even during the trip, we knew it was significant, because I was attacked with fear weeks before he went, to where the trip was almost canceled. Like, it was, I was delivered from a spirit of fear years ago. I have not experienced fear like I did. So, like, up from the time I was delivered until that trip, and we knew, like, this is significant. God is going to do something. We don't know what it is. Whether it was just for me, or for Gabe, or for the people down there, all we knew was he is supposed to go on this trip. And he got back, and I think he shared a little bit about the reconnection he made with community down there, and how hungry they were, and how isolated they were. Even though they're Christians, they're not plugged into churches, and they're just kind of out there floating, and not, they're so hungry for fellowship. And one of the things that impacted him down there, and then one of the things that impacted me while he was gone, was just having a meltdown, actually, and my friends coming to my house and just being there in the middle of it with me and loving on me. And I never I didn't have to go through it alone. And here there were families that were going through terrible things, feeling alone. And that really impacted both of us. But it wasn't just that. There are things I can't even put into words of how when we got back and we started sharing stories with each other, and we just knew like the Lord is doing something. We don't understand it, and he's doing something. We kind of went like this, like, if this is you, God, then it has to be all you. We're not going and banging on doors. We're not making any huge changes. Like, you have to bring it to us. We'll trust you. And I mentioned we prayed our kids' hearts would be changed and that he would bring the open doors. But between that moment and that first Zoom meeting with Hospital Yehoah, I wrestled so deeply and so personally, because it has been the sweetest and hardest 10 years, because I came to this church lonely and wounded.
Wow.
And I'm leaving it like so rich, and for years just like crying out to God for community, because I don't believe we're supposed to go through life alone, right? Not we have our spouses, but we're not supposed to go through life without friends and community. And I just kept saying, like, well, Lord, let this be something that's like halfway, like maybe sometime there and sometime here, because I don't want to give this up. Like, I built this. And he was like, really? You built this? And I was like, I mean, I was pretty vulnerable.
It was part of it. Something, right?
I invited people over. But so 2 significant things happened. And then in November of 2022, the first was we were in worship one Sunday, and we were singing that song that's worthy of every song I could ever sing, every breath I could ever bring. You're worthy of my whole life. And I'm singing it. I'm saying, like, yes, Lord, you are worthy of everything. Like, I will follow you. And he said, but will you give me your community? Am I worthy of your community?
Dang.
And I was like, I wish I could say I said yes in that instant, but I just started bawling, and I was like, I don't know, Lord, that one hurts. That one hurts. Like, that's my fail-safe. If all the world goes sideways, I know I still got my community. I still have my people. They're always going to be there for me.
It's interesting, just listening to your prayer was like, God opened the doors and changed my kids' hearts. But it's ironic that then the next 5 months is almost like him saying, let me do it. Let me do work in you first, and then we'll focus on, which is so true. It's so true.
He always does it with us, and it felt very parallel with the kids. Like, the more I was like, yes, the more the kids were opening their hearts.
It's interesting.
It was very fast for the kids. And so, I realized through that the Lord was like, your community is your alabaster box, the thing that you save back. Because if all the world goes sideways, your people are going to be showing up at your house to support you, to be there for you. They are a safe place. But can you give me your alabaster box and let me be your fan safe? Let me be the thing that no matter what happens in this world, like, and we want to say, like, of course I would never have said I didn't trust God fully.
Yeah.
But I was that. And so I said, okay, God, like, you are worthy of my community. You are worthy. Like, I will give them up for you.
So let me ask, because you said in that moment of that worship song where you felt like the Holy Ghost challenged you, will you, that you didn't say yes right away. What happened, or how long? Did you have another moment where,
I think it was just a few days of letting that sit on my heart and just saying, okay, Lord, like, I love you, and you are worthy of it all. Like, I only have this because you have it. And it was just several days of walking in that with him and talking to him about that. And is this really what you're asking, Lord? Like, are you're really asking me to do this? And then coming to the place just in talking with him, I'm like, okay, it's all yours, Lord. And it was in that time period that he also gave me a beautiful picture or vision, I don't know what you want to call it, and it was of our church, of my community, and it was this tree. And I saw faces of the people I love and the people in this church under this beautiful fruit-bearing tree. And it was like a a beautiful painting, summer painting, and we're all under there and we're eating the sweet fruit from this tree. And there's also fruit falling to the ground and rotting. And God said, look how beautiful the tree of community is. And look how much you enjoy the fruit, the good fruit of community. And it was like he took me in that moment and showed me like all the places in the world that haven't tasted the good fruit of community and fellowship. And he said, take the fruit, like the fruit that's falling, take it and let them taste and see that God is good. Plant seeds there for them to learn to eat it. They don't even know. He said they don't even know what this fruit is because they've never experienced it. They've never tasted and seen God's goodness through community and fellowship. And I've like carried that with me so many times of like, this, what we have here is so precious. And there are places that in my mind are like, when I see them, they're painted gray because they've never even experienced it. They're living in isolation and loneliness, even though they're a part of the body of Christ. And, just to take those seeds and plant them in those communities. And I'm not responsible for what happens, but I believe the Lord is going to grow those same trees there, and they're going to be taking it to other communities. And
that's awesome.
It's going to be,
that's really
it's going to be amazing. So. And I think through like wrestling surrender, the sort of the clincher for me was your mom, right?
Okay.
I met with her in March of last year. Before, this was exactly 1 month before the first Zoom meeting.
Okay.
And I was talking to Tammy, and I was telling her, like, we don't know what's going on in our hearts, but like God is doing this thing. But it's so hard. I don't want to leave my people. Don't want to leave my community. It's comfortable, which has been another thing God's been working in our life. Like, move past comfortable. But she said something that sort of broke me in the best way. And she was like, if you overstay your time, what is a blessing will no longer be a blessing in your life. And I was like, you're not telling me this.
Take it back.
Take it back.
I feel like those are like the words of a sage in a timely moment.
I really was like, can you take that back?
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, like we know God is moving us to another place. But, this thing that I treasure, when I'm not supposed to be here anymore, that's no longer going to be the blessing that it is. And, so it was a lot of, for me personally, just every day saying, okay, Lord, okay, you are worthy of it all. Like, I won't hold anything back.
So do you feel like those two revelations were kind of what you needed to be able to say, I'm in?
Absolutely.
I'm in. Okay.
Yeah, I absolutely did. And Gabe and I are two very different people. He needed different things. And I think that's also been part of our journey. And I don't want to speak into his story. Hopefully he gets to share more of that, as time goes on, how God met him specifically. But I think too, like as a married couple, we've grown so much in allowing each other to have our own walk with God. We were not always at the same place at the same time in this journey. Sometimes he was more ahead, or I was more ahead, or one of us was willing to say yes faster than the other. And instead of being frustrated, just saying like, well, Lord, you meet each of us individually. And if this is something you have for our family, you're not going to give me a revelation you don't give him. Yeah. You're not going to say you're not going to tell him that we should go and not tell me that we should go. And so just allowing God to work very individually in each of our lives and bring us along to where we are both willing to say yes and ready to say yes to.
One thing that's cool for people to hear that, from this, because a lot of times you want to do whatever God's will is for your life. In your mind you want to, and sometimes you even feel like maybe what it is, but when the moment arises, it's like a totally different thing, and you think you're prepared for it, but then all of a sudden God is like, I'm ready to do something, and then you're like, whoa, wait, hold on, I love the idea of it, and then, but He's so gracious, you're right, to give you the revelation, to give you the time, to give you to work to work through it. He's not this tyrant or whatever that just says, no, you're supposed to have a good attitude the whole time and let's go and how dare you think about this, that, and the other thing. But, he really is patient and willing to work and gives you plenty of time. And I think, it's a good thing for people to hear in general because, you never know when God will call or be ready. So,
and I think he just knows. Like we forget that he was human.
Yeah.
He left his home. And he had to take on all kinds of really uncomfortable things as a human. And he's just so patient with us. And he's so, I think what's the word I'm looking for? He's so individual with us. He's going to meet you where you need. Like he knows what you need for confirmation, for revelation, and what you need is going to be different. And I think when he's moving us into something, or even just every day walking with us, like he cares and he knows what it's like to be us, and so he's going to meet us in those places of need, and he's not going to meet me in Gabe's place of need or your place of need. And so I love that, like walking with him the past almost year now, which I've been born again since I was 15, but it has been so special because I have seen him meet me in more personal ways I think than I ever have, and that's just been so special, so sweet.
Yeah, it's amazing. What do you think about having some questions?
Go ahead.
Okay.
I love questions.
So, I was thinking about it. I think it would be interesting just to have you speak a little bit to your past in terms of, you guys kind of touched on a little bit Sunday, but just the heart that you probably even from like, I guess maybe your teenage years or something that you had towards other places, other cultures, other lands. And I would assume that there were points and times in your life, maybe during all of that there was this, God was developing obviously something in you towards that, but I'm sure there were even prayers that took place in a significant way in those seasons of time in your life that maybe now you're beginning to even see fulfilled.
For sure.
Yeah. Can you just speak to a little bit of like your history with, the traveling that you did and what God was doing in your life?
Yeah, it's been blowing me away standing here today and like looking back on everything that God has done, and like you think sometimes that the dreams or things God put in your heart are dead. But sometimes they just need to be dormant because he needs to refine other things in your life. Yeah. Because that wasn't ready to flourish or that wasn't ready to bear fruit. So true. So I joke, but not really, that I cut my teeth on Elizabeth Elliot. I think I was 14 when I read the journals of Jim Elliot. And I was intense. Like, we're going, like we're doing this.
Which one is that?
Jim Elliot was martyred in Ecuador.
He was the airplane?
Him and his team
flew in there?
Yeah, they killed him. Yeah. But then his wife ended up going back.
Living. His wife and then a sister of one of the men.
They got a movie about that, right?
Yes.
End of the Spirit.
It's some heavy stuff for a 14-year-old. Like I have an almost 14-year-old, and I was like, I'm not ready to hand you this. But my grandma loved books. I grew up next door to my grandma, and she and my mom always had books available, and so I read like every missionary biography
That's interesting.
I could read, probably from the time I was like 12 until, I still read them. And so I grew up with a lot of ambition of the nations for Jesus. And looking back, what I didn't realize then that I realize now is that I said, oh Lord, I love you. This is how I want to serve you. Instead of saying like, Lord, you can have my life, whatever you want. Like if you want me to stay in small town Spruce Pine, I will. I was like, no, this is how I want to serve the Lord. And it really was my own ambitions and my own egos, and it sounded exciting and stuff, but the Lord uses our immaturity. And so I got a chance to go to Mexico when I was 15, and we just helped at a children's home. And then when I was 18, a family that used to be a part of our church, he was actually the associate pastor, they moved to South Africa, Johannesburg, South Africa, and they actually planted one of the first interracial I guess interracial is the right word, church where they had Afrikaans, blacks, whites, Jews, Indian people. It was
sounds like a cool church.
It was amazing. It was amazing to get to like see that started there because it was early 2000s. And Johannesburg just wasn't their thing. So I stayed with them for a summer and got to experience that culture, do ministry to Jewish people, which was very, very amazing. We would go into the nursing homes. They were like all Jewish nursing homes. We would go in there. I played harp, so they loved that. Yeah.
How did I not know you played
harp? I know,
harp?
right? I'm like learning new things.
Yeah,
I knew you played piano, but I didn't know you played harp.
I used to play harp, and so I rented a harp while I was in Johannesburg and would take my harp like to these Jewish people and play the harp for them.
That's amazing.
And they just loved it. Like I learned some Jewish folk songs.
Yeah.
And would play for them, and then I'd play hymns, and then he would preach, and that's
really cool.
It was amazing, and it was so neat. I think that trip impacted me deeply because I saw how a family, they were a healthy family, which I didn't come from a super healthy family setting. So I got to see first and foremost how a really healthy, rooted family operated, but they were missionaries, but they were normal people. It was this is how. This is how it is, and that trip was so life-changing because that was when I realized you take all your same problems with you on the mission field. You have all your same things you have to deal with. You're still a family. You're just doing it here in South Africa. So that was really neat. And then when I was 20, I did one of the craziest things I've ever done and went to Central Asia for the summer alone. I joined a team. I flew there alone and joined a team in the foothills of the Himalayas after the big earthquakes in India and Pakistan. And so I was the field secretary, and I wrote all the home reports of what we were doing. So we were building houses for widows and families that didn't have money to rebuild their houses because the earthquakes had decimated entire villages up in the mountains. And and I was the female face because it was a completely Muslim community, and so the men would go and build the houses, but they're there's all these women and children that we don't get to have any contact with, and so I was able to go into their houses and learn how to make things and talk with them and hold their babies, and
that's incredible.
It was an amazing trip too. So those were my big mission trips, and through all of those I think the Lord just really opened my perspective. I was a small town mountain girl for most of my growing up years, and through those I just realized I started seeing the gospel through a lens that wasn't American. This is how we think here, but when you take that to a Muslim community, the Christians maybe interpret that completely different because their lens for the world is completely different. And the same, in South Africa, not everything American and the way we believe translates well into other cultures. And so I think just through those trips, the Lord just changed how I viewed a lot of the world and continued to this is what I want. I want to go. I want to go and be a part of these people's lives, and I want to learn to think how they think and understand why they think differently, or why this part of the gospel is maybe hits them different than it hits us. And then I came home and started dating and got married.
And had kids.
And in the beginning, Gabe and I definitely thought we're not going to be in Spruce Pine long. Even when we bought our house, we were hey, 2 years, we're selling it. But the Lord just definitely closed those doors, and I went through a season of grief. I didn't even realize I was grieving until once again I was here. I feel so many moments happened in that sanctuary there, but someone was praying for me. I think it was Tammy again, actually. She was I just feel, Hillarey, you're grieving the loss of dreams. And in that moment, I was I didn't even realize it, but I was the life I thought we were going to have of going to the nations and all these adventures. I realized I was grieving, but she didn't leave it there. She said, the ashes of your lost dreams are the fertilizer for what God is planting.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, I don't think anything's sprouting from these dead dreams. Like, this is our life now.
Yeah.
You're probably wrong in the moment, but I was like, I appreciate it, and I'm open.
It's funny though, because I'm like thinking, when you guys are young or whatever, like Gabe's off in Ukraine, Gabe ends up going, you know, to Honduras or whatever, you're off in South Africa and then the Himalayas or whatever, just all over the world. But then all of a sudden, Little Spruce Pine, God brings you guys together, and he's like, little do you know what I have for you in the future, you know? It's just like, anyways, it's kind of cool.
I think the one thing I keep thinking is, like, you can just trust him. Mm-hmm. Like, you can just trust him. And I think these past, we've been married for 16 years now. We just had our 16th anniversary. But it has been such a time for me to say, I don't want my dreams. I want God's dreams. Mm-hmm. Because when I was young, it was like, what an adventure. Yeah. This is so exciting. Jesus, the nations, like, yeah. And now I'm like, just whatever you have, Lord. Like, I want your dreams. Just, I don't even want my own ideas. I don't even want my own ideas anymore.
Yeah.
So
that's really cool.
He's been really faithful.
Yeah.
So, out of the ashes, seeds plant.
Yeah.
The next time it happens, is it Honduras? Or was there anything in those 16 years that, I mean, it just really went dormant?
Yeah, it went dormant until there was one thing that happened in early 2020. I don't know if you remember this, Ryan, but you prophesied over Gabe that something about business, but that God was not done with Ukraine or Honduras.
Wow.
And we were like, well, we're just here now. We really, like, when God closed the doors and we came to a place where we surrendered and said, no, we are here. We're like, you know, we might be here for the rest of our life. We weren't looking for anything else. We would joke and look at houses, you know, in Italy. And this
Who doesn't?
And you know, we had talked about relocating for, you know, health reasons and stuff like that. But we were here. Like, we were here. So when you gave that prophecy, we just sat with it. And I remember a couple weeks later, we were at some friend's house, and Gabe was sharing it with them, and we all just, like, shook our heads, like, what does that mean? Like, something inside of us witnessed that was God speaking, but we did not know what it meant. And it was almost, it was 11 months later that he got the call for Home of Blessing to be on the board, which was our first open door. Okay. But that was, you know, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So up until that point, like, it was dormant. Yeah. We weren't looking. We didn't feel like God was opening any doors, showing anything, except faithful here, faithful here, faithful here, and lots of little obediences. Yeah,
it's cool.
Yeah.
What do you feel like? And this might be a bit of like one of those vulnerability questions, but I'm just curious. I don't know if anybody else is curious. I'm curious. Okay. But, like, for you personally, not considering your kids, not considering Gabe, but just for you personally, like, what would be your biggest fear or about stepping out and taking your family to Honduras and, like, experiencing that transition?
So this can't include my kids.
No, I mean, it can, but just like, you know, for you personally,
I think those are things that I have been wrestling through. I feel like God has been meeting me in every single one of them, which is it's just His goodness. Yeah. It's just His goodness. One of the first things I was afraid of was being lonely again, because I walked through such a dark season of loneliness. I was like, Lord, you can't send me into that again. Like, that you can't do that. And so that has definitely been one of the things that, looking into the future, like, I know that there actually will be seasons of not feeling as connected with the people there, because relationships take time. Yeah. But I do know I'm being welcomed into open arms to people who are excited to have us there. That's been one of
That's
the
cool.
hardest. Also learning to just say like, okay, Lord, like we're now stepping into a place where we're depending on you and your church to be our providers. That's a whole new season. So that's a little scary, but I know He's good, and I think that one of the harder things too that I look and I just am always like, oh Lord, you have to. I feel like Moses sometimes, like, if you go with me, if you go with me, I'll make it. We'll be okay. But walking through grief and transition while also walking my kids through grief and transition, that looks very scary to me. And thankfully, Gabe is so, this isn't the first time he's done this. And I'm always, like, leaning on him, like, this is going to be okay, right? And he's like, yes. I'm so thankful that he already knows a little bit what to expect, what transition is like, and just reminds us all the time, like, there's gonna be really hard things, but the future is so bright. Like, like their lives are gonna, the kids specifically are gonna be so expanded and everything. So I would say those are my top 3.
That totally makes sense. And I would say even when Gabe was talking Sunday, I was just thinking to myself, he was specifically talking about how he grew up and he was fairly transient. They moved often, and I grew up very much that way, a large part of my life. And so, even just as an encouragement to you as a mom who is, concerned with that aspect of your children, there's a large part of me that really, especially looking back, appreciates the variety that I was exposed to,
awesome.
Throughout life. And it doesn't mean that it was necessarily easy in those moments, and there were definitely places that were very hard for me to leave and that kind of thing. But now that I'm older, and my outlook on life has formed more, maybe hopefully more maturely,
right.
Just there is almost a level of appreciation for one, just God's faithfulness in all of that, but two, also some of the ways that impacted our family specifically, and it really did force us to be close, and we're still close, today, very close. And so in some of those moments that were difficult and were tough, just seeing the hand of God in it, getting to meet a lot of different people and experience a lot of different cultures. And so there's, with anything, there's the pros and there's the cons. Now as a parent, I look at my children and I appreciate the fact that they've only ever, Riley's the only one of our kids that's only.
I could never move.
And so now I'm in a whole different place of thinking, but at the same time I do have this understanding of knowing, like, I made it. And I feel like it didn't mess me up. In fact, like you
it expanded you, right?
And that's a great word.
Keeps using. Like,
it's a great word.
It expands you as an individual.
It does. So. And to this day, I still have connections and friendships with people all over the country, because of that. And I think that's beautiful, in some ways. And that's in no way to be derogatory to somebody who grows up in the same place their whole life, but I'm just saying as an encouragement to you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I need it. I think Gabe touched on, like, I'm monoculture. I grew up in the same house for 20 years, and then we actually lost that house in a house fire. Okay. So I feel like I've only moved once. And so I was like, in my mind, I have 2 homes, like that home and then the home I live in now. And so I'm like, I've just ever had 2 homes. I've never even had to hardly move. Like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Let me ask you this. In light of you guys transitioning in October kind of being the goal, what are some ways that you feel like personally as a family that we as a church in your community can, like, help and walk with you and be supportive now that the transition is getting closer and closer and closer? It's becoming more and more very real. But what are some ways that you feel like, just for us to know, like, how we can involve ourselves? Because sometimes you don't necessarily know what to. Transition can be awkward and it can be strange and it's not that sometimes we don't want to be engaged in it, but sometimes we just don't know how to be engaged in it.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really hard question, actually, because I'm not always sure, what we need. So much of what you have to do it yourself.
Yeah. Yes.
So I'm not always sure either. I think, for sure, prayer is a huge thing. Praying for our hearts, praying that our faith would not fail.
Yes.
Praying that we would be, on one hand, like single-minded towards the goal, and on the other hand, rooted in honoring the relationships that we have here.
Yeah.
We have wonderful family counselors with our sending org that we already met with, and one of the biggest things they told us was honor your relationships for as long as you're there. Honor the goodbyes. And I think just
don't check out.
Walking with us through that, helping the kids know that they're loved and they're going to be missed. I think that's been a hard thing to watch the kids of, like, they're so excited to go and they're so sad to leave their friends, and they often wonder, like, are we going to be able to talk to people? Are we going to be able to keep up relationships? I think they just need that assurance too, that they're going to be loved even from afar. And of course, we're stepping out financially, and that's a huge thing. And so anytime, the Lord lays something on someone's heart, that's definitely a blessing.
Which I actually have an envelope for you on my desk.
Oh. And that's really awkward. That's actually a really awkward thing to say, but we're liquidating our businesses and just depending on God and His church to take care of us, which is a whole another story, maybe for another time, of like how God took us from we will only ever be self-supporting missionaries to being willing to say, okay, Lord, we'll trust you and your people.
And I think that that's good, just to bring clarity for everybody watching. Gabe is involved in the construction side of overseeing this whole project, but that does not mean that Gabe is drawing a salary.
No, there's no salary involved.
This is.
I'm glad that got clarified.
Yeah.
I thought he was working in the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, he's working to build the hospital, but then Ryan helped clarify that.
Yeah,
and I was
this is a step of faith,
which is awesome.
100%, and truly, you guys, this is a missional call that God has placed on your lives, and so you're dependent on churches and individuals to pray and to be faithful and generous, to support that, and 100%. Yeah. So that's important to know.
As awkward as it is.
As awkward as it is. And then I have just a follow-up question to that. As we think about the future, okay, so the Yoders have fled the mountains.
No, we're not fleeing. Don't listen to him. We need to clarify. We're not fleeing.
They have left. They have been sent out of the mountains.
Thank you. That's
that's better. It's not as dramatic. You guys have landed. You're in Honduras. You're engaging in the work at hand. What are some things in the future that you can see relationally between what you're doing there and the church here, and how we can engage with each other?
Okay, this makes me so excited, guys, because I think we've already established I'm a dreamer.
Yes.
I got plans and ideas.
Yes.
So this is very exciting for me, because once the hospital, the construction starts, the hospital mission itself, Hospital Yehoah, wants to bring down mission teams.
Okay.
And so that is one thing. But before, if teams want to come down before, we have open invitations to churches, possibly into schools, to children's missions and discipleship schools, and the public hospitals Gabe told about, they're open. You can go in and pray for people. And so we have been dreaming for 16 years since we've been together of taking teams down specifically to pray in hospitals and minister in churches and minister to kids. So we would love to bring a team from the bridge down. And take you to these places, and we can split up, and if you don't want to go pray for people at the hospital, we'll take you to our children's ministry, and you can work with kids all day.
Yep.
You know, we'll take Felicia
cool.
and her magic painting, and she'll be set all day long. And
that.
so that is one
awesome.
of the big things. And Gabe is dreaming of like possibly when teams come down, teaching like a cultural relativity course. And
That's cool.
when I was in Pakistan, I actually worked a lot with the teams that we brought in because we had teams every 2 weeks. It was my favorite thing in the world.
That's
was
awesome.
like welcoming in a new team and showing them the work and watching them get excited for what God was doing somewhere else. So that just the mission team aspect excites me so much
awesome.
because it changed my life, and I can't wait to see like other people get involved. But what was the rest of your question? I got derailed because I got so
No, that's good. Yeah, that pretty
Yeah.
much was it. Is just
Like
speaking
teams,
to opportunity for a reciprocal relationship between these two places.
And we would love just visitors too.
How long? I don't know if that got answered Sunday, but how long are they expecting the hospital to take to
This
get built?
is a better question for Gabe. I believe that the hope is operational within 2 years of groundbreaking.
Okay.
But we have not, and it's in stages. I think there's possibly five stages.
I think
Does that
so,
sound
yeah.
right? So, like the very last stage, it will be about 12 years, I think, before it's completed. The very last stage, but the first stage would be like operational in 2 years with some beds.
And then additions. And,
And it'll keep growing and growing from there. But they haven't broke ground yet. We're still waiting on this is Gabe's expertise, but some approval,
I asked Alex
environmental.
today, and he said, "All I know is we have to come back every 3 years."
No, false information. Fact check. Not true. we have to leave the country every 3 months. He came home.
3 months?
Yes.
Oh.
But we won't be coming back to the States. We can stay somewhere in Central America. We just have to leave the country for 48 hours to reset our visa.
Oh, okay.
And then we can go back in the country. So he came home and asked that question.
you
And I was
to
like,
tell
oh,
him.
buddy. So yeah, we're applying for residency as soon as we get there, which will leave at, I don't know how long we have then. Once we have residency, I don't think we have to leave.
Okay.
But until our residency is approved, every 3 months, we have to exit the country for 48 hours and then come back in to reset our visas.
That's wild.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Funny buddy.
International life,
Yeah. I'm excited because we have El Salvador, we have Costa Rica, we have Guatemala,
Right.
Belize. Like there's lots.
Oh yeah, a lot of
You
options. A lot of good food.
Yeah. I'm not sorry that we get to explore some
Yeah, right.
Central American countries while we're at it.
Yeah, that's cool. That's interesting. But yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah.
Open up some great opportunity to check out other things, and places.
Yeah.
Hillarey, is there anything else that?
I don't think so. My heart feels light. I feel like I shared what I was supposed to
That's
share.
cool.
That's awesome.
And
go
I
ahead.
would just think it's super practical just to hear your journey, because it's so. I mean, God, He works in similar ways. He just is who He is, and it's cool to hear that because there's so many, even what you were sharing, similar to like me and Felicia's journey of leaving Indiana, and so again, like as people are listening and 5 years, 10 years, whatever years down the road when God starts moving on the hearts of others, I think it's cool for them to just remember somebody's personal story of how God brought them to that place, and so I appreciate hearing that part.
And there's no shame in wrestling through.
No.
Not being
No.
willing at first. I think we think when we go on the mission field, we're just brave and strong and fearless.
Yeah.
And no, we're depending on Jesus. Like I'm literally just
100%.
like throwing myself on
Yeah,
Him.
when I am weak, He is strong.
You carry me. If this is what you have, you carry me. And I do think there's one last thing I would like to say, and it is in seasons where it's gone dark, is to not despise the small obedience. Because God, looking back on those years, God was working so faithfully and intricately in our lives. And we didn't even completely recognize it at the time because it seemed so mundane and so everyday. But it really was just His voice leading us in teaching our family, in business decisions, and making friends. Like all of these things that you think they're just a normal part of life. But when you're walking with Jesus and you're asking for His input and you're just being obedient to what he's telling you every day, that it's like a bank account, and it's adding up and adding up and adding up until all of a sudden we looked at each other at the beginning of the year and we're like, are we actually, we're talking about this, like we are doing this now.
Are we doing this?
Because in so many ways it really was like all these little bitty steps until we came to the step to say yes. We're like, we just said yes.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And I would just say, anyone in a waiting season or a quiet season, if you think that the Lord has put you on a shelf and you're of no use, like, no, just listen every day and be obedient every day, and don't despise what he calls you to do, even if it's small. Because that faithful and little, right?
Yep. And I was just, as you were talking, I was thinking to myself, you know, when we read the Bible, especially like just different people that we see spotlighted in the Bible, and we see these incredible stories of things that they did and how they obeyed God, and you know they did all these like amazing things, and it's easy to look at it and say, well, that's the Bible, and that was Abraham, or that was Moses, you know. But at the end of the day, like, God hasn't. It's not like when Revelation, you know, the canon was completed, that it was like, well, that's the end of God calling or sending people places. But I think what is really interesting, and even just for us as a church, and I said this briefly Sunday, that in some ways I think what God is doing in the Yoder family right now, and we're all standing and watching this happen. You know, we're looking and seeing God calling a family out of our church to go somewhere far away to do something specifically for Him, and I related it to like a first fruits type deal. But the thing about it is for those of us watching, for those of us that are a part of this journey and what God is doing in your lives, it serves as a confidence builder, really, is when you look and see in people's lives Him working, and then all of a sudden transition and shifting and sending happens. Then for the others that are in the church that are maybe not necessarily at the point of like going, but God has got them in that 10-year place.
Where they're like, this is inside us. We don't know what to do with it.
And I believe that there are
yeah.
others in our church that God has been working and doing things, and they look, and now they're seeing you guys beginning to go off and blaze a trail, and that instills a confidence and the ability to say, okay, God, like, just like I've read in Scripture and I've seen in the Bible people, you know, going after you and following you into places and doing things that were mind-blowing. Like, now I'm seeing my own friends. I'm seeing my own people that I love around me making the same decisions and making those same steps. And I believe that that can be a contagious thing, that, you know, and it doesn't mean that we have to go looking for or trying to make things happen, but we just have to be faithful to what God is doing in our lives. And it's like I said, God is sending you all to Honduras, but there might be somebody or someone's in our church that being sent looks like right here in Mitchell County, you know, and He has a way of doing that and placing us and putting us in where He needs and where He wants us to be, you know, at those times and seasons. And so to me, it's just such an encouragement and a huge honor, I think, for our church, that God would entrust us with a family that has been journeying with Him for such a time, and now it's come to a place where, okay, it's time. It's time to step out. And like, for me, that's really weighty, and I think for us as a church, it's important for us to see that, know that, and feel that, and also understand that there are others that in time down the road, the Lord may do the same thing, and we can't hold on to things. I believe that that's when we get in trouble, especially in the kingdom of God. Even, you know, you can relate that to your finances or your resources. Is when we try to hold on to things, is really when we get mixed up. But if we, like you said earlier, just kind of have an open hand and say, okay, God, like, it's yours anyways. These are your people anyways. And so, like, as much as we love them, as much as this doesn't feel good and it's not ideal, we understand that this is important to the grand scheme of what God is doing and wanting to do in the earth. And we're a part of that, and that's really special, and it's something to value and to honor. And so I'm super thankful just for that, what I see God doing subtly in places, and then in some ways not subtly, but in how he's working in various aspects of people's lives. And I know me and Maria have experienced that, and I think we, as time goes on with Jesus, you will. Because at the end of the day, I believe 100% that he is very much a sending God. He is. I think Scripture backs that up. And when we look at Jesus, God himself is a sent God. Jesus steps out of this incredible place that we call heaven, and we look at, and he comes and makes himself available on earth as a sent one. And so God's not asking us to do anything that he hasn't done himself, No,
and I think we think, like, when we hear sent, then we think we have to go. We need people to go into the dark regions.
Yep.
But we're all, like, maybe I'm being sent or called to Honduras, but I'm also just sent to the grocery store.
That's right.
The best advice I ever received as a young mom was my mission field is a space between my 2 feet. And I don't know how many times I have been at the park or at Walmart or at my kitchen sink.
That's so good.
And I'm like, no, like, Lord, you sent me here to this spot. Like, how can I shine my light here?
Yep.
Right here. This is where I'm sent to. And when you adopt that mindset, you just God's gonna do stuff.
Yep.
He's just wait.
That's amazing. Yeah, so good. Hillarey, thank you. Thanks for taking time.
Thanks for having me.
Joining us today on the. We still have a good name for this. We're still operating under a working title. So thanks for joining us today. Have a conversation. Yeah, absolutely. And we are truly so excited for you guys, and just honored to be a part of your lives. And I'm excited. I'm going to be going with Gabe here in a couple weeks to Honduras.
I'm so excited for you guys.
I'm sure.
For a second there, my wife leaned over and she's like, "You're not going?" And I was like, "I left the country a couple times. I didn't know I could."
There's still time. She hasn't bought the tickets yet. There's still time.
Yeah, there's still time. But I'm really, like 3 hours. I'm really excited.
Excited for you guys.
It's gonna be fun. Gabe, I already told Gabe. I'm like, listen, I know like 3 Spanish words, so I'm gonna be highly dependent on you.
Don't worry.
It'll
great.
It'll be great. Yeah. But really excited about that. So thank you guys for tuning in today, watching. Be praying for the Yoders and love on them, talk with them, stay up to date with them. Pray about how you can get behind them. I know as a church, for us, through Kingdom Builders, we intend to support them as best we can. And so that's an option. Or if you just feel like God personally lays something on your heart, then do that, please. Because they do. They need your support physically, both and spiritually. And so look forward to seeing you guys Sunday. We're going to be starting a new series called Walking in the Light, which I'm really excited about. It's going to be good. So we'll see you soon. Take care. Love you.
See ya.
Bye.